so last year, or anyway, a while ago, we did a video detailing a shootout of 3 rangefinder, medium format rangefinder cameras, the Mamiya 7, the Mamiya 6, and the Bronica RF645. It was a lot of fun. We hired a model to come into the studio for the day. Her name is Chelsea, and she was great. And Lucy, my chocolate lab, made an appearance and made sure she wasn't forgotten. And we got some good footage, and actually some photos that I was really happy with. And we, recorded me bouncing around the studio, and we talking about the 3 cameras, which ones I like the best. Mamiya 7, even if the square format of the Mamiya 6 was more to my liking. I found the optics of all 3 to be overly sharp and a little clinical, with the 7 being the least clinical of the 3. And yeah, those Mamiya lenses are really sharp. Like, amazing what you can do when you don't have to worry about a mirror box when you're building, lenses. There's no compromises from a retrofocal lens design point of view. Of course, it does make a difference when you see all those mirrorless cameras that are coming out these days. Bronica 645 was nice, but a little contrasty, and maybe even too contrasty. The Mamiya 6 is a camera that I really kind of struggle with. I mean, I love the form factor, but the images just kind of leave me cold. I've shot about 50 rolls of film with it, and I'm still not entirely sure where I sit with it. So anyway, during the shoot, I wanted to compare apples to apples as much as possible. So we had the same shooter, me, same film, which was some recently expired Kodak TXP 320 in 220 format. We had, of course, the same model. We had the same lighting, the same studio, same everything as much as possible. I processed all the film in D76, and I scanned it all on my Hasselblad scanner. And I dutifully trundled through the footage, and most of which was actually pretty good, and illustrated the process we were going for. But when I went to put it all together into a video, I kind of lost my nerve about the whole process. And here's why. The day that I also, when we were shooting, I also shot some film, same tracks professional, in my Hasselblad, in a Pentax 6.7, and with a 4x5. And I like those photos as much or more than I did with the rangefinders. The rangefinders just weren't really shining in a studio setting. And don't get me wrong, they're great cameras, but I actually was really lamenting when I was doing the video that I couldn't have included more photos of this camera and this camera. And if I did, we were going to end up with a feature-length film on me blabbing about all the different images, and that really just wasn't going to work, given that it was supposed to be a rangefinder shootout with these 3 cameras. So there were some other problems. In the Mamiya 6, I had an ancient roll of color film in it, and a bunch of the shots that I took right at the very beginning were in color and hideously underexposed. So, which is kind of the nature of the Mamiya 6 meter, but it really just didn't help anything. And so that began to sort of make the narrative a bit more disjointed. My apples to apples comparison was starting to become a bit of a fumble. And dad injury, or insult injury, I guess. With the Mamiya 7, a bunch of the images that I shot were in a setup that I really just wasn't that happy with. There were a couple of shots that I really like off the Mamiya 7, but what happened was I was actually gravitating more to the photos that I did with the Hasselblad, the Pentax 6.7, and with the 4x5. And so it left me sort of. The model, of course, looked great, no matter how we photographed her. But it left me stuck because I really wanted to show the photos and I wanted to talk about the rangefinders, and I really couldn't, figure out a way to do it without doing what I'm doing now, which is, rambling and not making much sense. My thesis statement in the script is buried somewhere, and I don't really have access to it. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm trying to say, except that, so here's where I ended up. The Mamiya 6. Aside from the fact that I loaded expired color film into it, and aside from the fact that I totally overexposed those first few images, once I loaded the proper film to the camera, I did manage to get some images that I was really happy with. Things were, as always, super sharp and a little clinical, but the camera itself is actually a delight to shoot with. It's a real wonder of filmic, compactness, and these cameras take up surprisingly little space, and they really are just incredible. And and I've shot a lot with it over the years. I've had it for a few years now, but it still just kind of leaves me sort of cold. I'm just not drawn to the images, and not drawn to them the way I am, say, with a Hasselblad or with my Reliflex. And so Mamiya 7 took me a while to love this camera, like quite a while. But I do actually love it, and I learned how to love the spot meter. I learned how to get used to that. And it took a while to just, I mean, like every camera, it took a while to get used to it. But I do really like the 6:7 format, and it's nice and close to the 4:5 format, which is also one of my favorite formats. And the images are just somehow not as clinical as they are with Mamiya 6, and I'm not really sure exactly what that's all about. But I'm moved more by the images out of this camera. Bronica 645. A little contrasty. They suffer with the 6:4:5 ratio is not one of my favorites either. And this camera actually would have been a real contender in the market if it hadn't come out right when camera companies were on life support back in 2000 and I can't remember, 2002, 2003, something like that. And it's an incredibly well designed camera. It's incredibly well thought out. It's a little too snappy. The images are a little too snappy for my liking, but it's certainly it's kind of fun to shoot with. If nothing else, they're pretty rare. But then the other cameras, right? So my Hasselblad, this is my 203 FE. I've had it for a number of years. I love it. I shoot with it all the time. I don't have anything bad to say about it because my very first medium format camera was a Hasselblad, and therefore they're the best. But to be honest, actually, the one thing that really challenges me now that my eyes are getting older is focus. The images just do not pop into focus like they do on a Pentax 6:7. So that's kind of strange. I have to be really careful with this because otherwise stuff just is kind of blurry. So this is Pentax 6:7, a big surprise to me. I had actually never tried one until a friend of mine loaned one to me. I actually had the 105 2.4 on a Pentax 645 body, but same reason why I didn't really care for the Bronica necessarily, the 645. I didn't like the full stops. I didn't like the format. But on the 6.7, it's really amazing. I mean, I never really understood what all the fuss was about these cameras until I picked it up and started shooting with it, and I immediately fell in love. And it's big, and it's ugly, and it has a 1/30th of a second flash sync, and the mirror is incredibly aggressive, snapping up and down. And yet, I totally love it, and I don't really know exactly why, but this one really speaks to me. So other cameras, just going to throw this in. This is my Reliflex, and I just want to talk about the fact that this camera, another camera that I totally fell in love with, unlike the Mamiya 6. Same format, this is a 75, this is 75 for the Mamiya 6. And even though this camera came to me broken when I bought it from on eBay, it was supposed to be not broken, and yet lo and behold it was. So I had to have it fixed, but before that I put a couple of rolls through it. All the photos were blurry and really kind of, poor, but I loved them. And that was actually something that I was really unexpected, or it was really unexpected. How do you look at a set of images and they're all out of focus, and yet you totally love them, and yet you look at a set of images that are all in focus and you're kind of left cold? I'm not exactly sure how that works, and yet, there it is. So I don't know. I don't know if who knows? Who knows what it is? It could be the setup, could be the way you shoot, could be the fact that when you look through these cameras. Well, these cameras you don't, but when you look at these cameras, you see the lens, or you see the image wide open, so it's nice and soft and kind of blurry, whereas the rangefinders, you're looking through a rangefinder, and you just don't have that option. But that said, overall, after a day in the studio, the most important thing is that I actually had a lot of fun, and I got some photos that I was really happy with. So it was definitely not a loss in any way, but I will say that these three cameras, the rangefinders, really belong outside and not in the studio. But I feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity. These cameras aren't mine. A friend of mine loaned them to me, which was very kind. And it was just a lot of fun to shoot. So thanks for watching. And if anybody wants to comment on what their favorite medium format camera is, I'm all ears.